Hello and welcome back to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam and we're going to continue on and just have a shorter lesson for this one. Just going to look at this. It's going to tie together all the things that we've been looking at with chain of predication, synonyms and things like that. So it's a dense point but has a lot to be said. So let's get started. Hyparkai detais usiais kaetais diaphorais to panta synonymos. Apauton legestai. Synonymos. Os. Right, so synonymos, what does that remind us of? Well, you guessed it, it is chapter 1, the second lesson. All right, so if we look here, where is it? Synonyma delegatai honto de onnamam koinon. So name in common, kai ho katatunoma. And according to the name, the definition of the being is the same. Right? Logos tes usias ho autos. So if you call human beings animals, that's a synonym. And we go down here. Where are we? And it's come back up again. Right? Synonyms are said of them, or synonymously they are said, right? Or in more logical English terms, univocally spoken of. The differentiae and the substances such as secondary substances. Okay, so when we use those terms, we are speaking with synonyms, synonymously. I need to look up how to say that. I've never had to say that before out loud. Is all of them, all these synonyms are taken from them. All right, hyparkai means it underlies or it is a feature of. It's a distinct marker of these things that of all of them, of all the synonyms that we have, that are said, taken from them. So bipeds, bipedals, the quadrupeds, these are univocal terms, are they not? Because they can take many different species and refer and signify them all at once. We can signify all these different species, even different genera all at once. Okay, so if I say animal, I can signify all the genera of reptile and mammal and amphibians and so on and so forth. If I said celestial bodies, I could be referring to planets and meteors and asteroids and comets and moons and black holes and quasars. Okay, so celestial bodies, right, is a genus, a large genus, and knowledge as well. That could signify all the different types of knowledge that there are. And with differentia, tais diaphorais, and by the differentia, or from the differentia, no, by the differentia would be best here. Tais diaphorais, the same thing. Okay, so I mentioned biped and quadruped before, and I could say one-headed. Okay, I could say the winged. All right, if you have wings, that can represent more than just birds. Okay, more than just birds have wings. Butterflies, bees, wasps, moths, dragonflies. I think they're the most successful animal when it comes to kill rate, aren't they? Dragonflies. Anyway, so pasai gar hai ap auton kategoriai e toi kataton atomon kategoruntai. So of all the individuals, ton atomon, again, go back up. Where is it? This is going to be a harder one to find because there was this one specific point where it spoke of it being anyway, I'll find it in before another lesson and bring it back, but where it said that primary substances are individual, and that's the word it used. Okay, so atomon, where we get the word atom from, it means individual. Domos, like being able to be divided, and meaning not. So not being able to be divided is the equivalent for the Latin word individual, not able to be divided. And so according to the individuals, the primary substances, these things are the predicables, things that can be predicated and are being predicated of them. So you look at any individual and you've got some things that can be predicated. Okay, so of the horse, you can say, you don't even know the name of the horse, okay, but you can say, okay, it is a quadruped, it is warm-blooded, might be milk producing, it gives birth to live young, and all those definitions of those things the horse can be defined by as well. So each and every, take your pick, you can define the horse by that. All right, you can name the horse by that. Okay, same with the man. Everything that's essential to being a man, you can sometimes name him by and predicate him by, define him by. All right, e kata ton aedon, and of the species too. So, and of the species, it's in common as well. So let me do a different one. See the moon here. See the moon. The moon, the same thing. Okay, so it's a celestial body, right? That's a univocal way of speaking about it. It's a moon. That's a univocal way of speaking about it, right? We could call it Luna. We could call it, what's a mythological name for it? I mean, Luna would be one. But there are other mythological names for this. And that's like naming its primary substance, because it's our moon, is it not? It's our moon, right? We're not talking about the moon on around one of the moons around Jupiter or whatnot. We are speaking about our moon. When we say moon, everyone thinks about this one, all right? So this is a primary substance, and it's got its own species. It belongs to moons, all right? It's got its genera, celestial body, and everything that can be said about celestial bodies in general can be said about the moon. So one thing in common with celestial bodies is that it is interorbital or extraorbital. It's like something that's either beyond an orbit of something else or within the orbit of something else. And you can say that. You can say it is not terrestrial. Okay, well, obviously, and you wouldn't say that about this either. Okay, it has its own differentiae, which is dividing it from other things. Okay, why is it that moons are a different category than stars? Okay, they both can be bright, luminous lights. What's different? Well, stars have nuclear fusion. Stars are made of plasma. Okay, so we wouldn't say that moons are made of plasma or capable of nuclear fusion. So those are differential that separate it. Is there another one that's like that? All right, go here. And we say knowledge, all right? Knowledge is in Dante's head. What knowledge does he have? Well, he has grammar, he has music, to be sure, because his original poem, The Divine Comedy, is musical in its rhythm and its cadence and its sound. Theological, he's got strong theological knowledge. Logic as well. Scholastic philosophy as well. So we would say that those are different species of knowledge that reside in the mind of Dante. Even poetry, of course, represented by Virgil here. So yeah, they all exist, and mythology as well. So all exist in his mind, and they separate into species because they have differentiae which make them unique from other species. Okay, so that's a nice wrap up of that. And they can be predicated, they can be named and predicated by these things. So if you go back and think about this, you might not know that that's a dactylic poem, or you might not know that it's X or Y form of poem. You might not know it's a haiku before you're told it's a haiku. You might not know it's a what's that famous French one? It's got French in the title. But you see my point. You can just call it a poem. You just call it a poem. You can just hear it, see it, and just call it a poem. Okay? Dante might be able to tell you exactly what type of poem that is. But if you don't have that same level of knowledge and understanding, he and yourself can both call it a poem. All right. Same with warfare. All right. If you want to say warfare is a kind of knowledge, you can say submarine warfare and terrestrial warfare, like land-based warfare and underwater warfare, are two different types. They have their own differentiae. Okay. So you can name them, you can define them by that, and everything you can say about these broader terms, you can also say about the more specific terms that fit into it, like a Russian nesting doll in a way. All right. And it underlies all of these things, that they are synonymous in this way, that all synonyms are taken from them, that's all univocal. When I call a haiku and I call a limerick a poem, that's a univocal way of speaking. When I call grammar and poetry knowledge, that's a univocal way of speaking of those. If we go back to the moon, that's a strange sentence, isn't it? If we go back to the moon, if I can find the moon, another strange sentence. Let's go to star. Star, if I call this a star, and I call, if it was a star, it could have been a different phenomenon causing this light that looked like a star. But if I point at one star and point at another star, and I call them both stars, that's univocal. But in matter of fact, one could be a binary star, one could be a supermassive star, one could be a brown dwarf, so it's still univocal, and all synonyms are taken from the fact that we're speaking according to either the differentiae or the species, okay, or the genus, okay, but never the primary substance, of course. And yeah, so gonna leave that there. The next lesson, just as a hint, apomen gartes protas usias udemia esti categoria. So we never, from the first substances, we never use that as a predicate, okay? We never predicate that of something else. So for example, okay, say the tambourine girl looks like someone you know. You can't then just predicate of the tambourine girl that she is that person that you know. You and I and everybody listening to this and studying this stuff can never be used in the definition of somebody else. Let me say that again. In the definition of any other human being, we cannot be used. Individuals cannot be used in the definition of another individual. Same, not just with humans, but with animals as well. All right. You cannot define any old horse by Farlap or by Bucephalus or by Sergeant Reckless. Okay. They're never used in a definition. All right. We'll get into that, and I think that just makes sense as well, because you got to understand that when we say Bucephalus, or we say Alexander the Great, or we say what's another one? We say Earth, or we say Mars. They're all unique and individual and just one. All right, they're just one. They're irrepeatable. They're just that thing, that primary substance, that instance. So why would you use it in the definition of another when that's a separate thing? Okay, we're talking about primary substances here. But if you said human, okay, this is a human, I'm going to define that as human. That's fine, because there are multiple instances of human. Okay, and there's multiple instances of primary substance. So I hope that's tied a bow to an extent of pretty much the whole chapter thus far. Like the whole chapter thus far has melted down into this sentence in a way. It can be unpacked in such a way. Even the term grammatical. If you want to call someone, if you want to call different parts of grammar, all of it grammar, that's the same thing. It works the same way. Or if you want to call the different parts of syntax, it's the same thing. Different parts of musical theory, then that's fine too. It works for conceptual things, things that exist in our intellect. just as well as it does for physical things. That's the best point to conclude on, is that, say, Christian is a conceptual idea, okay? It's not a naturally occurring idea, okay? So Christian, if you then, let's use a different color, have Protestant and Catholic, and you have, what's another one? Protestant, Catholic, you then have Jehovah's Witness, okay? Jehovah's Witness, or Mormons, whatever you want. Protestants, Catholics, Jehovah's Witness. You can see that the concept of Christian is the intellectual idea of it, has been divided into its species, and each species will have, the reason why it's a species is because there is differentiae separating them. That's where we're going with this study. We're not just looking at the physical. Of course, the physical is a great place to start because it's easy for analogy and metaphor and similes and making the abstract concrete. But this is where we're ultimately heading, to investigate these properly and all other such intellectual things properly, and reasonably, and be able to defend each statement that we make, okay? It is a sign of the times that defending each point that you make is becoming less common, less expected, that someone is able to prove and able to defend every single move that they make with their reasoning, their argument, all right? In fact, it's incredibly rare and memorable if a person does do those things, all right? And it's very delightful if a person does as well. It's very convincing if a person does. It's an intersection of rhetoric and logic when such a thing occurs. And that's where we're aiming for. So these complex intellectual thoughts and ideas, okay, can be explored using these lessons that we're learning, which rely on the concrete to make them memorable and knowable in the first place. So you learn them through the basic things first. That's why he uses examples like running and conquering and stuff. If we go up here, like cow, running, conquering. So he uses these basic examples, but he's aiming towards the more complex, okay? We have to learn how to float before we swim, okay? We don't want to skip all the steps and drown, right? Actually quoting a Australian artist there who articulated that thought, that common expression. So we're learning to float before we start to swim in the deep waters, because we don't want to drown, okay? So that's where we're heading. I hope that makes sense. If it does, wonderful. And I will see you next time. This was a shorter lesson, I think, but sometimes it's better to have a shorter lesson and cover a denser point than drag out a lesson because we're covering multiple dense points. So yeah, that's why this one's a little bit shorter and to the point. And I will see you guys next time. Si semper fortis in opere tuo. My name is Liam. Thank you for watching.